Thank you guys for coming. We are excited to be here today and honored to be presenting to you guys today. Our primary goal today is to not only highlight some of the gaps and blind spots that we have noticed over the past 30-some years of doing business planning in our group and working with some of the platforms to my left. Some of the blind spots that can derail the succession exit planning, to provide you with kind of a high level integrated framework and how we approach this subject. I want to keep this conversation as conversational as possible. So the meat of it's going to be a discussion with the panel to my left. So we'll spend the majority of time doing that. I think we'll have questions at least 10 minutes after we're done. So let's meet the panel. I was given a bio. These are try to point us through some of this. To my far left, I got Bryan Beauchamp. He's the founder and private wealth director of Beauchamp Group, nationally recognized wealth management financial security firm in Milwaukee. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
With more than 35 years, that's all you can do this, Bryan? Has dedicated a career to helping owners of closely held family-owned businesses protect, grow, and ultimately transition the wealth tied in their lives. 1999, Bryan co-founded BMG with Cy Malecki, building the team into a trusted advisory firm to high net worth families and business leaders. Today, BMG manages over $1 billion in client assets, is recognized as the Forbes Best in State Wealth Management Team. He's a longtime member of BizTimes, Wisconsin, two-time premier, sponsor of Wish for Our Heroes, focusing on the team's charitable efforts supporting the U.S. military, both active duty and veterans. Flying in today from Cleveland, just for you guys, Scott Mashuda. He's a co-founder of REAG, leads the firm's growth and strategic vision, bringing over 2 decades of M&A and business valuation experience. Prior to launching REAG in 2004, he was a senior valuation analyst at Ernst & Young, advising public and private companies on sale, purchase, valuations, and restructuring. Scott has served on the board of M&A Source since 2017, was the board chair in 23, and honored with the Service Award in 24. Named one of the 40 under 40 top M&A service providers by the M&A Beiser. Pretty impressive. Scott has taught entrepreneurial finance at Beauchamp, correctly, University. Fun fact about Scott, for all you Marquette fans out there, Mashuda Hall is named after Scott's dad's great aunt, correctly, Josephine. Apparently the hall was a hotel on the day when the Beatles once stayed back in the 60s. Jack Enea to my left is an accomplished attorney, CPA, and senior partner at Husch Blackwell, representing closely held companies and their owners in all aspects of business law. His clientele spans high net worth business owners across diverse industries, family offices, healthcare, retail, financial services, and manufacturing. Try to look at one out. Serves as primary outside counsel, advising on startup strategies, wealth management, asset protection, and succession planning. Notable achievements, many, but such as guiding century-old family-owned manufacturing companies like yourselves through complex succession and tax planning. So that is our tier 1 panel of planners here for this topic today. Let's see, that's kind of weird. I've never done a bio on myself, but I have planned. Unlike many, we don't just plan and provide and make introductions. That's a very important part, a good first step. We choose to provide leadership, quarterbacking the entire journey from pre-sale through post-sale, really trying to make sure all the value that you've spent a lifetime creating is fully realized, the process is coordinated, and your legacy endures. At the end of the day, in simplest terms, exit planning is either going to create freedom or regret, right? Every owner will exit. The only question is whether that's by design or by default. Exit is not optional. Whether this is a lifetime asset or not, it's going to happen. And when that moment comes, success is really going to come down to addressing addressing a 3-dimensional challenge, we call it. That's readiness, it's wealth, it's enterprise value. And falling short on any of these topics can really undermine your outcome. And it can certainly erase decades of value that you spent building. I'll say this a few times today, but these are not abstract concepts. They are make or break realities. And this panel to my left, I mean, they've spent decades, really spent decades helping owners uncover, close, and turn these gaps into lasting legacies. So I guess today, we're going to do our best to try to explore what the right kind of ecosystem is that you need to put together across law, tax, M&A, and wealth planning. I think engaging a team like that can really help many of the business owners that might not even realize some of the outcomes you can achieve. So essentially, the way we look at it is every business owner faces 3 critical gaps. If these are left unaddressed, it's really going to be putting your wealth, your legacy, your family harmony at risk. When you can close these gaps ahead of the exit, your outcomes are not only going to improve, they're really going to multiply. As stated this before, but the research is really sobering. I don't think a lot of people quite understand it. I've seen so many of these. Most businesses that are going to go to market are not going to sell, and very few of them are going to realize the money that you thought and were expected. And even fewer owners that we find personal without the type of planning, find that personal satisfaction afterwards. So, the truth is, you cannot afford to wait, right? Starting years in advance, just like Michaela was talking about, I think you can really shape your outcome and get ahead of these 3 gaps. It looks very forbearing, but they're all in that order for a reason. And ultimately, here's the key. No single advisor can do it alone. To get it right, owners really need to put together the right team of experts, working from a shared framework towards one objective. Obviously, that is a successful exit. So, from our experience, there's basically 3 inevitable questions, right, that a business owner must answer. First, am I personally ready? Is my business structurally ready to thrive without me? And that's going to be your readiness gap. Do I have enough wealth? Is that structured in the right way to sustain my lifestyle and sometimes more importantly, fulfill my legacy to wealth gap? Is my business positioned to deliver that value, to fund that wealth? Even if you're ready and your business is worth a lot on paper, is it transferable? And if not, how do I maximize it? That's your value gap. But everything I just brought up, that's better, should have been closer. Everything I just brought up, coordination, leadership, value capture, it really depends on one thing, readiness. Because without that, none of it's going to matter. When you break down why so many exits fail, it really traces back to that one single gap. It's not market time. It's not valuation. I think Scott would agree. But it's personal, it's financial, and operational readiness. So let's start there. I'm going to ask each one of these panel members, and I'm going to ask for you to kind of, from your experience and your perspective, go into the first question. Most owners think they're ready to leave until reality hits. Jack, starting with you, what blind spots must be fixed before it's too late?
My script says you were studying with Bryan. I have a mic in my hand. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, BMG. Happy to be here. I mentioned to Scott a little earlier, when you have these topics can go in so many different directions, and when you have a diverse group in the sense of different size companies, different professions in the room, it's difficult to kind of narrow down the conversation that's specific. to any one of you, so we'll be talking in general terms, but from a readiness standpoint, I personally think of it in a couple different ways. I think of it in a emotional readiness. As Steve said, am I ready to leave? Is my family ready to exit this building? Let me back up one step. My practice area is where corporate, private wealth, and M&A more or less intersect. So I tend to look at things in these types of conversations from a generational succession planning standpoint, and not necessarily from a sales standpoint. Although I've been involved in many sales, I've been involved in many management buyouts, I kind of look at this through the lens of generational succession planning, which, when you talk about emotional readiness, as you can imagine, there's a lot of emotion in that. And so helping clients get past that, will the business survive? Will my employees be okay? What am I going to do? What's the next chapter of my life? Actually stepping away so the next generation can take over, assuming that they're ready. So there's the emotional readiness side of it, and then there's what I will call the procedural readiness side of it. And if you were in the main session, I lost track, but they must have used the word plan and planning 300 times. And you can tell that all of those companies are very organized. They have structured plans. They follow them, but they're fluid in case they have to call one go left or right. So procedural readiness is very important, and having it documented is very important.
Scott, was
So, just to give you the short version of what I do for a living outside of the bio is I take a business and I convert it to cash. Essentially what I do, I create the liquidity event. I go to market for a non-marketable company, a closely held private company, and we convert and create liquidity for that business owner. So I guess I'm curious by a show of hands, how many business owners do we have in the room? Business owners? Awesome. So here's what I can tell you. The facts that Steve shared are scary, right? I mean, when you think about the businesses that sell and don't sell, I think they're a little bit skewed, probably skewed by some smaller businesses that really aren't saleable, if you will, or very difficult to sell, might only be attractive to an individual or a local buyer. The markets that I deal with, we sell to strategic acquirers, we sell to family offices, we sell to private equity, primarily. And so in doing that, I'm basically at the end of the road. I'm there to create the market and do the deal, essentially. And I can't tell you how many problems you see when you sit in that seat. So what I want to do today is really share with you guys some of those problems that I see, kind of maybe things that business owners should be doing that they aren't doing. And, Steve hit the nail on the head. It really is all about planning. Because I can create the outcome that you want. You just have to decide what the outcome is that you want. And different buyers buy for different reasons. They buy different ways. Guys that sit in my seat are familiar with that, right? Like I said, you have private equity buyers. How many people cringe when I say private equity? Do you cringe? Nervous? Listen, what I've found over the course of my career is that most people cringe when I say private equity because they don't fully understand it. There's a very good place for private equity in the market. Let's say that you want your management team to buy out the business. Let's say you have a partner in your business and your partner wants to buy you out, or you want to buy out your partner. How are you going to fund it? That's what private equity does. They don't want to buy 100% of the company. They want to buy 60%, 70%. They want you to retain 30 or 40%. They want your kid maybe to have 20%, you have 20%, and they have 60%. They fill a void in the market to allow transactions to happen and allow you to monetize your business in a way that you otherwise couldn't. But they're professional buyers. They buy businesses for a living. That's what they do. So they're very careful about what they buy. They're very careful about how they buy. They control the risk, right? It's a risk versus return analysis when you're looking at buying a company. And I think, at the end of the day, if that's the scenario you want, and a private equity buyer can create that for you, you need to build your company in a way where it's attractive to private equity. Maybe a strategic acquirer provides you the best outcome. Right? Maybe you don't have a great management team in place that can run the company, can grow the company with private equity. And a strategic acquirer already has that, right? Because they have an existing management team. Let's say that you have a customer concentration issue. Private equity is not going to get involved, right? Because you have that concentration. But if a strategic acquirer comes in and buys you, they dilute that concentration issue across their business. It's no longer a concentration problem. So you can get your value out of the company that way. Okay? But you don't want to go to the market and say, hey, here's what I got. Who wants to buy it? Because then they dictate the outcome for you, and it's not the right way to go about it. If you decide what you want to accomplish, and then you plan with Steve and with Bryan, okay, if that's the outcome you want, and this is the buyer that will help you achieve that outcome, what do you have right now? And how does that compare to what it has to look like to create that outcome? And then you can start to implement and make those changes. But I think the one and most important outcome that I want you to understand today is that you control that outcome. And it's very important that you control that outcome. How many, from the business owners in the room, how many of you get letters on the daily saying, I want to buy your business, that come across your desk? Emails, letters, phone calls, whatever the medium of is, right? Is there any bankers in the room, any lenders in the room? Okay, so, sorry guys. It's like when you go to the bank to get a loan. Everybody's interested in doing that loan until you get underwritten, right? And then you hear all the problems and the reasons why you're not going to get that loan. That's what those letters are, okay? Just because you're getting those letters, don't get a false sense of security about how marketable your business is or isn't. So if you plan and you build this thing the right way, we can create a great outcome for you. But it's all about having that vision and planning towards enterprise value.
Awesome. I love the landscape, but I think you hit it home, and this isn't going to happen within a year, right? This could take years. Bryan, from the wealth planning side of things, what are some of the key things, the blind spots that you see?
So, what we find is that most business owners are used to relying on the cash flow of the business, whether you own a real estate company, a manufacturing company. Can you guys hear me okay? Am I a little bit close, a little close here? Is that better? Yeah. You're used to getting a salary, a regular cash flow from the business. When you sell, you no longer have that cash flow from the business, and most business owners are very uncomfortable with what is this new reality that's going to exist. So it's very psychological. They own a business or they own real estate for a reason. It's because they don't trust the stock market completely. They don't trust all these other financial vehicles completely. So there's a total education process. In some cases, a deprogramming process that needs to take place to really help people understand what the possibilities are and what levels of risk they would need to take in order to get to where they want to be. And ultimately, what everybody's interested in is financial security. That's what they want. And in my opinion, people don't sell primarily because they don't feel comfortable that they will be financially secure and their families will be financially secure.
Bryan, just sticking on that theme, for you personally, what are some of the questions that you ask that cut through some of the assumed readiness, other words that we could use for it, but pretty much expose whether you are in the family, the team are truly prepared?
Yeah, this is a little different topic than what I just was talking about, but these are two really important things. Do you know what the basis of your company is? Most people, when I meet them, I say, hey, what's your AAA account right now if you're an S corporation? They have no idea. They don't even know what AAA is. But the basic, what you're going to realize after you slice and dice everything with taxes and debt and all the other things that come out, the fees, investment banking fees.
That's the biggest one.
those.
They're worth every penny.
Accounting fees, legal fees, what's gonna net out at the end of the day? Second question, have you reviewed your cap chart recently? Most business owners, I met with a business owner 10 years ago. Succession planning was the topic. They didn't even realize that their wives owned virtually the entire company. They thought somebody else owned it. I mean, that's an unusual circumstance, but it's not that unusual. I've seen it more than once where people didn't even truly understand what it is that they actually own. So review your cap chart and what's the basis of your stock. And spend some time with your accountant or your tax attorney to really understand the tax situation.
Who's also a CPA. Jack, I'm going to stay in order because I don't want to upset you again. More
Confusing.
more deals, whatever you can read. Well, let's see. Here we go. More deals and wealth are lost, actually, in family conflict by taxes. How do you design governance to preserve the harmony, protect some of this conflict that you see before that transition takes place?
So governance is, what's governance? Governance is control, direction. It's important, again, back to that keyword, planning, to have a well-documented plan of who is in control, who will be in control, what roles and responsibilities people will have. Again, keep in mind, I look at things through from a generational succession planning standpoint. So mom and dad transitioning a company to their child or children. I will tell you, co-CEOs rarely work. Paying the daughter CEO and the son who's in charge of sales and marketing the same salary only works for a short period of time. So making all of that very transparent and communicating it is very important. In terms of readiness, I got a very simple example, a real life example right now. I just was referred into a matter where the sole owner of a company died unexpectedly at early 60s. This was a couple of years ago. His children, his 3 children, are between 22 and 32. He didn't really have a succession plan in writing. He had some estate planning, which provided that his assets, which included his company, went into a trust for the benefit of his 3 children, none of which are ready to run that company. His trustees are his siblings. And so the state of readiness for this particular event was next to zero. I can tell you, we talked about, I think the initial question was owner readiness. It goes beyond owner, right? It goes to the management team's readiness, the workforce's readiness, the family's readiness, the extended family's readiness. In this particular situation, if the siblings even knew that they were the trustees of the trust, it probably came up at Thanksgiving dinner where the gentleman who was unfortunately gone said, "Hey, by the way, I just did my estate planning and I named you guys as trustees. You okay with that?" "Yes." Pass the turkey. I mean, it was probably something to that. And now they're in the thick of it, right? They're trying to run a company that has 1,200 employees, and they're responsible for their nieces and nephews who are the beneficiaries of those trusts. So a well-documented plan and communication is extremely important.
Scott, when structuring a deal around our owner's goals and exit path, what factors in your what you've seen in your experience are most decisive? And I think you already went through a lot of that, that'll impact the market that you might see. Just if you can just elaborate a little more on that.
Yeah, sure. And I did share with you the 3 types of buyers that we tend to think about, and it all starts with deciding what you want, right? Building it that way. Things that will dictate what type of buyers are interested or not interested. Recurring revenue. If you have a recurring revenue model or you project-based revenue, that will really matter. Are you, as the business owner, do you also have the sales relationships? Do you have the customer relationships? Do those sit with somebody else within the organization? Because if you are looking to exit fully, but all the revenue rolls through you, or the majority of the revenue comes through you, how are you going to walk out the door and that buyer feel comfortable that the business is going to continue to produce that EBITDA that they're buying, essentially, if the person who controls the revenue goes out the door? Do you have customer concentration issues? Meaning, is 50% more or more of your business within the top 3 customers? How well diversified are you from a customer concentration standpoint? Post-COVID, buyers care about end market concentration. That wasn't really a thing in my world pre-COVID, but post-COVID it absolutely is. We saw entire industries shut down, and there is now perceived risk around that. So you want to have some end market diversification. Strength of the management team will dictate who is or is not interested. You talked about real estate a little bit. Private equity firms do not buy real estate. They will sign leases. They do not buy real estate. You can do a sale leaseback with another company, for example. There's other ways to deal with it. But it all, again, it's what do you want to accomplish? Hey, we deal with a lot of businesses that are in small town USA. It's very important to the owner that the business stay within that community, that the jobs are retained, that they can go to church, they can go to the grocery store after they sell the company, and that people still speak to them and speak highly of them. And that is the exit that you ultimately want to create when you're sitting in my seat. But that all starts with thinking about your business in a way that's sustainable where it is, and that starts with you.
So I want to get to all 3 gaps. I'm going to speed it up a little bit here, just in honor of time. But the readiness really is, if we had a whole day, it would just be worth it on that. Because none of it matters unless you're ready and the business is ready. So obviously the next question. The next question is essentially, once you're ready, will the deal deliver the wealth, the owner needs to sustain lifestyle, secure your family, and fund legacy? So here's the challenge. For most owners, 70 to 80% of your net worth is trapped in the business. And fewer than 30%, statistically, fewer than 30% have a plan to capture that wealth. This is the wealth gap. It's the risk the headline number won't translate into after-tax independence. And Scott, I think it's probably makes sense to start with you, because I think it's important to level set with everyone else before the deal even starts, even before you start to do the planning on that. So from your perspective, I think one mistake that sometimes is made is owners might think that the sale is going to be instant freedom, when we know that the sale price is just a number, right? How do you puncture that myth and show really what it looks like after taxes, after your fee, and all the locked up proceeds?
Steve, you say you want to speed this up, and then you ask me a question. Probably the most long-winded person up here. So I guess I'll let you talk mostly about the tax planning side of it, but I do want to touch on the fee part because it keeps coming up here. But no, think about this, right? If you're, and I just had this scenario with a client. They have a business, they knew who they thought they wanted to sell this company to. And they came to us at the advice of their financial advisors and said, hey, you got to talk to these investment banking guys. I know you want to sell the company to this group, and they've expressed an interest, and you kind of already initiated that conversation, but you still got to talk to these guys. And so we went in and we talked to them and said, hey, listen, we can build a market for this thing, we can create competition, it's what we do, right? There's milestones along the way that you set, so you keep everybody together, you run them through this process. So at the end of the day, you have the opportunity to look at 3 or 4 different options and pick the one that's best. In some cases, the difference is dollars. In most cases, the difference is not dollars. They're all within a certain range, and it's about getting something else that you want. Maybe it is not having structure on the back of the transaction, not holding notes, more cash up front, things like that. All that being said, the dollar amount that you get for the business, the purchase price, there are people that have helped you get there that do charge fees. I am one of them. But I can tell you right now that, there's attorneys, there's, tax guys, there's everybody involved. And I've heard a lot of business owners over the years go, you damn guys, I spent my whole life building this business, creating this value, and then, you guys all got your hand out when it's time to sell the business, and I gotta pay all you guys. Well, I can tell you that pretty much every time I've ever been involved, I've paid for myself plus. And I know that because the first LOI that I received does not look like the LOI that we end with, right? And the example I just shared with you, I had to prove myself, right? He wanted to sell this business to this person, to this company. And the LOI that they got initially was about $7 million less than the deal that they ended up getting. So I can very tangibly look him in the eye and say, and by the way, I don't cost $7 million. So he made out on that deal. None of us. You could have all the advisors in the room and it didn't cost that much. He made out on that deal, right? And that's what ends up happening, right? Because we go back to the buyer and we say, hey, you got a 2-horse race here. You're one of the horses. I'll bet you want this thing. Here's what I like about what you have. Here's what I don't like about what you have. Can you do these couple things? Can you change this? And oh, by the way, valuation is a big part of this too. So put your best foot forward, right? All that stuff matters. And what I want to tell you, and the point of the question is really that this stuff doesn't happen immediately. It's a 9 to 12 month process to sell your company. The look back period for buyers is 3 years. So they're looking back at the financials of the company for 3 years prior to the sale. They're doing a risk versus return analysis that you can produce and grow off of those last 3 years into the future that they're buying. Because they're buying the future, they're looking backward to assess risk. It takes me 9 to 12 months to pull it off. You might have an earnout, 2 to 3 year earnout on there if they don't believe your projections. So you've got to put your money where your mouth is and say, we're going to hit them. They said, we don't believe you. You're like, yes, we are. And they say, okay, fine, then we'll pay you for what it's worth today. If you hit those numbers, we'll give you more money later. It's contingent on you hitting numbers. That might be 2 to 3 years. You might have a seller note for a period of time. You might have a long-term lease. Point is, I can't snap my fingers and get you out of this thing. It is a process, not an event, and you need to think about it that way.
Jack, assuming that Scott's going to maximize the sale value, what are the things you can do even before that LOI, that last LOI gets there? Because as we've seen, statistically again, 30 to 50% of the deal proceeds can go to the IRS and even more. How do you keep the tax man from being the #1 beneficiary who's adding no value?
So piggybacking off what Scott just said about time, and this isn't done in a microwave, and it's part of a longer-term plan. Taxes and tax planning falls into that same category. As far as needing time, you can't be 2 months from a closing and think you're going to properly, there are some things you can do, but maximize tax planning in a very short period of time. So the time is to start now, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, for a number of reasons. So when we talk about taxes in this context, we talk about, there's really 2 broad categories, right? Estate taxes and income taxes. And not to bore you to death, but there are some people who get those confused and don't completely understand the difference. The estate taxes are the taxes the government assesses on the transfer of your wealth. So if you do it during your lifetime, it's a gift tax. If you do it at your death, it's an estate tax. The tax is 40%. There are some exemptions that you can apply against those transfers to minimize or eliminate taxes. And if you use them during your lifetime, you can use a lot of tools and resources such as discount planning, trusts, charitable giving, depending on what path you're on, to minimize and even eliminate those estate taxes, remove a lot of appreciation from your estate. And people fail to do that type of planning. This example I gave a little earlier about this gentleman who died a couple of years ago, his estate paid $2 million in taxes. And had they done planning a little differently back when he did it, and maybe made some gifts and transfers to those kids in the right environment, there may have been zero taxes. And the other side of that is the income tax side. Capital gains tax, ordinary tax rates, depreciation recapture, that's all largely related to corporate structure and deal structure. So getting your investment banker folks involved in deal structure with the LOI and what it's going to look so everyone has an understanding is important. And there's certain elections that people can make that we won't get into in this conversation, but there's a lot of planning that should be done well ahead of time in order to minimize both those estate taxes and income taxes.
So Bryan, let's assume we've got the most tax efficient deal structure. We've gifted, we've kind of done the best we could to kind of mitigate any kind of estate taxes. We've got an asset sale, we got all the depreciation, everything's buttoned up pretty good. Now Scott's got us the greatest LOI of all time. I think one of the biggest risks, in which it becomes one of the massive gap, is, you know, once that business income is gone, it's gone, right? How do you help owners face that reality by calculating their true number? What do they really need?
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time at our firm focusing on financial planning. And, you know, when you're a business owner, financial planning you don't think of what we actually do in financial planning. Financial planning maybe is like forecasting. And it has something to do with forecasting, but truly digging into how much risk can you handle. A lot of business owners, especially if they sell when they're older, get very worried about the ups and downs of the market because they're used to more of a steady ride. We know that they're in a much riskier position when they're a business owner because all their money is in one thing. There's usually debt involved. It's a lot more risky, but they're like a race car driver. They feel they're going around the corner at 200 miles an hour, but they're in control of the car, so they don't feel the risk. So helping business owners realize the risk that they're actually taking, and then the optionality around how much capital do you need. Start with a virtual risk-free plan. So if you sold your company, paid the taxes, paid off debt, and put it all in treasuries, how much money do you need? Run it all the way out to age 100, put any kind of charitable contributions that you'd want to put into the plan, put in legacy. Some people want X amount of dollars for their children or other family. And understand what the risk-free requirement is. Then we can sort of back into accepting certain levels of risk. Also, understanding how much, let's say you're likely to sell for way more than you need. It's the vast majority of our clients, when we estimate the after-tax sale proceeds, it's way more than they would need to cover their lifestyle all the way up to age 100. So understanding though how much you need for your own needs versus what the legacy part is super important. Because you're going to likely be able to take a lot more risk or accept more risk, the legacy component, than the part that you have yourself.
Yeah, I would argue that, just to add to that, the traditional growth projections, Monte Carlo simulations, those are great, but I think they really miss the mark with business owners. I think the approach you were talking, we like to do is removing the business from the plan. And what that does is that exposes that raw shortage. And then you're re-engineering backward from what you said, right? So what is that, when we talk about the true number, like let's figure that out. Because at the end, that's your baseline. Because if you can solve for that, the rest is, then you can bifurcate your assets between your security capital needed and and then your legacy assets, right? Then you can really lean into that side. We found that that's done a really good job of kind of creating that clarity that you're not going to get from just probability. Because to be honest, after you spend your entire life taking risk, investing in your time and everything else, the last thing you want is more probability, right? I think you have the ability to lock the way in, and that's the kind of analysis I think that owners appreciate. We're going to keep speeding things along a little bit, guys. I appreciate the amazing length of answers, but just got a few more things to get through here. Now that the business is ready, the person's ready, we've now figured out what we need. That all means very little if we can't transfer that value. And not to mention, not even that maximum value, but even fair value. The value gap is a 30 to 50% difference between what it's worth today and what it would be worth in investing class. Okay? And this gap comes from two places. Profit, it's a profit gap which lifts earnings, and intangible gaps, which is a huge part of the equation, which expands the multiple. And when you think about it, enterprise value is really just profit times the multiple. So if you're gonna, both levers need to be optimized in order to capture that full value. So again, when you skip the panel, you're going right to the goods. Bryan, what are the weaknesses most undermine transferable value, costly owners, could cost you on multiples, I think.
You want to put into the plan, put in legacy. Some people want X amount of dollars for their children or other family, and understand what the risk-free requirement is. Then we can sort of back into accepting certain levels of risk. Also, understanding how much, let's say you're likely to sell for way more than you need. It's the vast majority of our clients, when we estimate the after-tax sale proceeds, it's way more than they would need to cover their lifestyle all the way up to age 100. So understanding though how much you need for your own needs versus what the legacy part is super important. Because you're going to likely be able to take a lot more risk or accept more risk, the legacy component, than the part that you have yourself.
Yeah, I would argue that, just to add to that, the traditional growth projections, Monte Carlo simulations, those are great, but I think they really miss the mark with business owners. I think the approach you were talking, we like to do is removing the business from the plan. And what that does is that exposes that raw shortage. And then you're re-engineering backward from what you said, right? So what is that, when we talk about the true number, like let's figure that out. Because at the end of the day, that's your baseline. Because if you can solve for that, the rest is, then you can bifurcate your assets between your security capital needed and then your legacy assets, right? Then you can really lean into that side. We found that that's done a really good job of kind of creating that clarity that you're not going to get from just probability. Because to be honest, after you spend your entire life taking risk, investing in your time and everything else, the last thing you want is more probability, right? I think you have the ability to lock the way in, and that's the kind of analysis I think that owners appreciate. We're going to keep speeding things along a little bit, guys. I appreciate the amazing length of answers, but just got a few more things to get through here. Now that the business is ready, the person's ready, we've now figured out what we need. That all means very little if we can't transfer that value. And not to mention, not even that maximum value, but even fair value. The value gap is a 30 to 50% difference between what it's worth today and what it would be worth in investing class. Okay? And this gap comes from two places. Profit, it's a profit gap which lifts earnings, and intangible gaps, which is a huge part of the equation, which expands the multiple. And when you think about it, enterprise value is really just profit times the multiple. So if you're gonna, both levers need to be optimized in order to capture that full value. So again, when you skip the panel, you're going right to the goods. Bryan, what are the weaknesses most undermine transferable value, costly owners, could cost you on multiples, I think.
So yeah, Scott already stole the thunder on that one, but, customer concentration. I work with a lot of companies in the CNC world, the machining world, where one customer represents 60, 70, 80% of the revenue. So that's a tough one. And working with them to diversify their business, acquire other companies to get that below 40% is key. Owner dependency, it's nice to be needed in your business. It's nice to be the most important guy or gal in the business. However, you're shooting yourself in the foot in that process. That's really the opposite of what you should be doing. You should be trying to minimize your own importance. That's huge. And then just doing the planning early. I think those are kind of the three things.
Jack, is there anything to add from what you were talking about before? Not to get into specifics, because there's a million vehicles, and tactically there's a lot of ways to go about this, but the wrong deal structure can really erase a lot of the value that they've spent decades building, obviously. How do you structure it? Maybe just a few ideas that give kind of the range of outcomes that can happen, because I believe a lot of this is just about peace of mind.
It is, and when you're pre-planning, when you're planning well ahead of a liquidity event or a transfer, control is always a big concern. We're looking out a ways, and so if we're going to do any, I mentioned discount planning a little earlier, if we're going to do any discount planning, if we're going to do any gifting, if we're going to do any charitable type planning in trusts, control is always a big concern of the business owner. So we try and design around maintaining and retaining control, yet moving value. We balance that with the financial plan because when you transfer assets, you can lose some of the financial benefit of those assets in form of distributions and cash flow and things like that. So try and balance that with the client's needs and the financial plan that the other advisors are working on.
Scott, you ready to bring us home?
Yeah, I just looked at my watch, we got like 10 minutes, so I'm
Yeah,
gonna wax poetic on evaluation.
5 minutes.
So, thankfully for manufacturers, it's not 70 to 80%, it's more like 50 to 60%. I think we talked about a lot of those intangibles. A lot of them are intuitive. Any other words of wisdom in terms of in terms of measurables and multiples in that matter that you would just throw out to me, those of us in the audience?
Yeah, I'll keep this short, but this is obviously an important point. Price is only one part of the equation when you sell, exit, or transfer your business. And whatever your buddy at the country club told you he got for his business, he's lying. He or she is lying. And guess which way they're lying? They're lying high. Nobody says they got less than they got, right? And so don't fall into that fallacy. Valuation is a risk versus return equation. Understand that. And the risk side is the multiple that you always hear about. What multiple do you trade at? Well, it's hard to answer that question because what's the risk with your business, right? Until we look at all those things that you just talked about, and we fully understand the risk of the company, it's hard to assign a multiple to it. It's just talk. It's just 6 times, 5 times, 7 times. Well, I don't know. I got to look under the hood first and tell you, right? 5, 6, 7, 8 times what? We always hear times EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. The reason we use it, it's before interest, so it takes out your personal capital structure. It's irrelevant in the deal. It's before taxes, so it depends on your profit. Depreciation, amortization. Nobody ever wrote a check for depreciation and amortization. It's not a real expense, it's for tax. Yeah, so at the end of the day, the way the market sets up, the private capital markets we'll call them, right? So I don't deal with public markets at all. Small, closely held businesses. So there's a lot of money out there sitting on the sidelines looking to be invested. It needs to be invested. It was raised by private equity firms. It's sitting on the balance sheets of strategics. It needs to be put to work. is what it really comes down to. And if we just talk specifically about family offices, private equity, they have to show a return on those dollars. And good quality companies that can show a return are of interest, period. It used to be certain industries, certain verticals, right? Now it does move, right? Infrastructure is interesting right now. Oil and gas is not always interesting, right? I mean, we had some bankers in the room. You guys love oil and gas? I saw smirks right away. I mean, oil and gas is very cyclical, right? Things like that. The HVAC, it's recurring revenue that we talked about at the very beginning, right? And so some industries and some verticals that weren't sexy years ago, like when I started in this business, we were joking earlier. I mean, landscaping, HVAC, private equity would have never touched those. I mean, now it's crazy, right? And it's
Wealth management.
Accounting firms are huge right now. It's wild. So it does move, but it really comes down to, if you think about it, they're looking around corners for new opportunities because they're sitting on a lot of dry powder, which is my point of, if you have a good quality company, you're going to attract investment.
The thing to mention, just to answer to the detail on that, is that you don't have to spend money to find out. There's plenty of M&A advisors, there's value advisors, there's people who can give you a valuation and kind of walk you through the market without having to have a formal engagement. Because I think the puck's moved from just being there at the end. Now, M&A guys are there years before kind of developing that relationship on the come. And we're doing the same thing. I think even in your industry, you're putting in kind of the time because it deserves it and the market expects it. So, any other questions?
Any other questions?
Got one in the back.
A little bit of a side question here. As far as the relation to value protection versus value creation, cybersecurity. So I'm doing cyber coaching for a bunch of portfolio companies. You recognize that PE doesn't want to land in the press from a PE perspective, in the press about bad brand or cyber breaches, but what does that actually do for valuation? Having a great cyber security, robustness, and maturity in the manufacturing company.
You guys want me to take this?
De-risk. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say it maintains value, is what I would say, because it's always a part of due diligence, and for the process, when we get LOIs, you have multiple LOIs to choose from, and then you go with buyer C, we'll call it, right? That's the deal you're going to move forward with. As soon as you sign that LOI, you lose all of your leverage. All of your leverage, because now you're exclusive with one buyer. And you agreed to price and terms. Now they're going to come in, look under the hood, and look at everything. And as soon as they find something that they can detract from value, guess what? They're the only buyer now, and they know it. So IT is one of those things that we have one, we just put our LOI a week ago, and the IT audit is part of that. And if they find problems, they find issues, they will come back and say, hey, when we gave you that LOI, we didn't know about this. And now that we've uncovered it, now that we understand it, we're going to detract from value because we can't pay you that because we have to make an investment in that that's going to now cost us additional money, so we're not giving that money to you, we're going to make that investment in the IT side, right? So if you already have that done, you already have that in place, you would maintain your valuation that you signed up on the LOI all the way through to close.
Any other questions?
We just got one more hour. The doors are locked, so we're here anyway.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.